Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. And welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my friend Lisa Levy. Say hi.
Hello.
I'm so excited. This is the final one of the day for me, but I know that Lisa is bringing the energy. I'm so excited to talk to you. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Absolutely. So my business is 14 years in the making and the constant reinvention of itself. It is L Cubed Consulting, and I serve as a trusted advisor for organizations to help them learn how to adapt and thrive. So what does that mean, right? We work with teams to make sure that we have the right people doing the right work, and then we help them enable with technology. For me, it really is about those first two things, the right people doing the right work. Technology just gives us a little bump in effectiveness, but it really is important to me that we help our teams and my client teams learn how to use best practices so that they can grow and scale. And right back to my language, we want everybody to be able to adapt and thrive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. And I think that's such important work too. I know I am a coach for a friend of mine's program, and he teaches creative freelancers the business skills that they need to grow their business. And I think one of the biggest shockers to people as they go through this program is, we'll have them do this exercise where they have to write down things that bring them energy and things that drain their energy. And they're always surprised when I go through their work and give them feedback of like, oh, social media drains your energy. Good news. Don't have to do it. Prospecting. Well, you're going to either have to hire someone that can bring you prospects or like partner with somebody, or you're going to have to get comfortable with some form of it. You can't ignore it entirely, but like, yeah, you don't have to cold call if you don't like cold calling. You don't have to do what you don't want to do. And I think that ties into kind of that old employee model that we talk about, where it's like just a butt in the seat. But is it the right butt in the seat though? Another thing that blew their mind was when I told them that I'm pure strategy, pure copy. I don't push buttons. You don't want me to push buttons. I will find the nuclear option if you get me anywhere near the back end. So like, let's just keep me in the sandbox where I belong and not try to put me over there.
Absolutely. Right. And we all have places where we thrive, right? Our strengths, we play to those, play to our passions. Mm-hmm. And we can't always only do that, what we're passionate about. Prospecting is that perfect example. I am a business owner. I have led this business for 14 years, and the word prospecting makes my hands turn clammy and my, the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. But
oh yeah.
It's important that we interact with our clients and our potential clients, or we don't actually get business. So knowing how to make it, for me, I have to gamify it. And it's not prospecting, but it's checking in on people. People I haven't talked to in a long time, people I've just met, and it is a conversation and it has nothing to do with business. And then the prospecting, right, that comes organically through a conversation. But I resist it every single time.
I love that you brought up that it's a conversation, because I think that's a big sticking point for anybody that talks about a sales conversation, right? They emphasize the sales part of it, but not the conversation part of it. And I think that that's a mistake, because I operated under that thought for a long time too, that misunderstanding of the process, thinking that if I'm getting on a call with somebody, I close them, I got to give them the irresistible deal and the pitch that's going to like, I'm trying to do all of these mental gymnastics to read this person's mind and somehow psychic my way into the perfect deal for that person. And I'm so focused on what's going on in here and trying to land it that I'm not actually listening to the person, which is what would have closed the sale to begin with. And maybe I don't close it on this call, and that's okay. But I started the conversation that might lead to this closing someday. And then exactly like you said, it's following up, it's checking in, it's just a conversation.
It's a relationship, right? And we are all sold to all day, every day, in every aspect of our lives. And how many of those things do we absolutely hate? I hate my inbox with the email messages with the subject lines, hey, just checking in. Hey, wanted to bump this to the top of your inbox, right? These are all sales tactics that make my skin crawl. And every time I find that I start to do one of them, I have to stop, walk away, and figure out what it is that I genuinely want to do with this human being. And is it a phone call? Is it an email with a little bit more meaning than just wanting to touch base? And when you find something that's actually a little bit more of an actual connection and a point where you can start that conversation, build that relationship, business will follow, and it always does.
I love that you brought that up. I feel like I'm going to say that multiple times in there, but just know I'm preparing to love everything that you have to say. What do I want to do with this human? Right? How do I want to work with them? What do I love about this person? How do I see us connecting? I actually landed the very first cold email that I sent out when I went out on my own after leaving the corporate job. I wound up, and it took a couple months for this contract to take place, but our connection was I dug through their website. This was an agency, and they had one of those, part goofy, part serious leader profiles on the page. And the VP of marketing of this agency had some sort of bit about how his favorite concert ever was one of those boy band concerts, with a whole bunch of boy bands at once. And I told him, I just got back from Summerland, which was Oasis and Sugar, or not Oasis. Everclear and Sugar Ray, and all of the 90s bands from that era. And I was like, oh, I imagine you and I would have so much fun going to concerts together, because it sounds like our tastes are similar. By the way, I'm a copywriter and this is what I do. And that's how we started that relationship. It wasn't about, hey, I noticed you need copy. I happen to have copy. Could we work together? It was finding a genuine connection, and not, and I think the intent was right too, right? I didn't go from an artificial, create this musical connection and be like, so now that we got that out of the way, let's talk business.
It's the dialogue, and we have to be able to continue that dialogue. And so we're on this whole topic, and we're on this topic because I hate prospecting, right? We're talking about those moments and those things that as a business owner or a leader that we have to figure out. Can we figure out how to do it? Can we find somebody else who is willing to do it? Can we afford to pay somebody else to do it for us, right? And these are things that as we're growing and scaling our business, we have to think through, because they are the foundation for us to be able to do the things that we do well, and be able to push aside or to somewhere else things that we don't.
Oh, yes. So, a funny thing just happened that right before Lisa and I started recording, I jinxed it by saying, I've had to clap to restart. That's a signal to my editor that we messed up and we kind of want to stitch something together. And I was like, we're going to make it through this entire episode and I'm not going to clap. I just had to clap because my little note-taking device suddenly shut itself down, literally as I was looking at it to ask Lisa the next question. And then I had no idea what I wanted to say because I wrote it down so I could stay present in the moment. And to me, this is just an example of how we can prepare and we can set ourselves up for success, and to be present in the moment, connecting with people, and still have things go wrong that you didn't plan for. And I just thought that was so perfect to what we were talking about, that it happened in real time. I'm here, I'm prepared to listen. And the technology.
Well, right. But technology will always fail us. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so, right, we just have to be able to pick up and move on. We're sitting here chatting and it's great. But, in business, when these things happen and systems crash, right, it's important that people know how to run their process.
Yes.
Without the technology. And I work with my clients in that space a lot, because people will say, yeah, we know what we do. We've got great teams. We do this all the time. And is that process documented? Is it written down? Do people do the same work the same way always? And, I get these really confuzzled faces. And I said, well, it's really not a process if it's not documented, and if that documentation isn't followed. So we would tend to rely on our technology, but then when it's not there, can we fall back and still conduct business as usual without that technology? And it's amazing how hard it is to actually do that.
Yes. Yes. That is one of the things that my friend teaches in his program too, which is how to document your process, right? Because that can be a little bit intimidating, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole in terms of how to do all of that. But big aha that most people get when they go through that is you already have a process. You just haven't written it down. You haven't documented. You haven't figured out what parts are working, what parts aren't working, how you could adjust things, how you could keep it, how you could make it more efficient or more smooth, right? And when you don't do that, doesn't necessarily mean you can't do business, but it means that you're spending a whole bunch of extra time and brain power and energy recreating the process from the ground up every single time with every single client. And like, just imagine how much more you could get done if you allowed yourself that freedom to just write it down and know how you work.
Well, absolutely. And the reality is, right, if it's not written down, it really isn't a process because it's not done the same way every time. And I know I'm being a stickler, and I know that that's like, okay, we're picking the nit on this one, but I am going to one more time because it's important that we know what they are. Because if I'm training you, right, I'm going to train you the way that I do it. And then I'm going to walk away from the job and you're going to do it. And you're going to do it the way that I trained you ish. But now it's the way that you do it. And so 3 years from now, when this business that we're building together grows and scales, and somebody asks George how to do this task, he's going to say, well, this is what I do, and this is how I do it. And I'll ask the question, why? He's going to say, well, that's why that's how the person before me told me how to do that. And they'll go, why? And we'll take it back, and nobody knows why we're doing this work. And heaven forbid it doesn't actually add any value to our business or to our customer. And so now we're wasting time and money and energy on something because we never wrote it down. So we don't know that we're doing it or not doing it, and it's wasted. So it's not real unless it's written down.
Oh, I love that. And that ties into what I think one of my biggest frustrations when I was still in corporate, the fact that nobody could answer why we were doing something. And if we proposed a new idea, it was always met with this resistance of, well, this is the way we've always done it. And so basically, we're not open to trying something new. We're not open to examining the way that we've always done it to see if it could be done better, because it's easier to just put that on autopilot, so to speak. And I know we're always looking for efficiencies, right? I'm efficiency minded too. And also, you've got to occasionally look at those efficiencies and ask yourself if they're still working the way that you want.
Absolutely, right. And asking that why and challenging the way we've always done it, that is foundational to who I am and how I show up with my teams, right? If somebody tells me why the reason they do something is because that's the way they've always done it, for me, that is like cue the horns and the confetti and eureka moment, because, oh my God, we have an opportunity to improve what's happening here. And that nobody realizes just how significant that improvement is going to be.
And that's awesome too, that you're coming at that from a place of hold up, celebrate. We just found an opportunity to do even better, as opposed to some folks that I see that kind of go into that, well, why didn't you know better? Why didn't you do better? Because we can't until we know, right? And so it's not necessarily that person's fault that they didn't think critically about how could I do better with this if they weren't given that opportunity or shown that model of how to do it in the first place.
Absolutely, right? We have to get to this place where we're proactively thinking about that on an ongoing and regular basis, right? That is a huge cultural reality that we have to create, one where we inspire people to question what they do and why they do it, where we continuously review how things work to try and make them better, that we experiment to learn things. And sometimes we experiment and get results we didn't want. Some people might call those failures, but those things that we don't want are learning moments that we apply back to the next thing that we do. But this is a huge cultural shift for many companies. And I'll pick on those companies right now that are big and boldly saying everybody needs to go back to the office. They want to go back to the way we've always done it, even though we've proven and we're showing that that way doesn't work. That way holds back tremendous numbers of people. And the surveys and the statistics say that 66% of senior leaders in those global organizations, if they are forced to go back to the office, are willing to resign. 66% of senior leaders. Gallup poll in the last couple of weeks done with Deloitte, I believe. Absolutely mind-boggling. So the way we've always done it is the first sign of there is an opportunity to do better.
And I think the pandemic showed us just how many jobs could be done remotely. And I I'm on the fence there because I think that it is vital to connect with the people that you work with at some point face to face. But I'm also grateful for the model that I had for working remotely when I worked on a team. And that was a couple of times a year. Actually, I think 3 to 4 times a year, we'd fly in for either a team meeting or an event that we would all do together. And then that made the connection possible that was happening virtually, right? Then I actually know this person and I feel comfortable asking them for a side call that's off the main calendar so that we can workshop this thing that I'm working on, right? I agree with you in that I think there's this stubborn tying to like, there's a certain kind of magic that happens in those side conversations where you're walking between meetings. I can have a side conversation after everybody else has left the Zoom too.
Absolutely. And there is no 100% right answer for the way that we should work.
Yes.
There is a time and a place where a whole bunch of people need to be in a room together, and that in a 4-hour window of time, being co-located in a creative space, they are going to create genius outcomes.
Yes.
There's going to be a time and a place where that same group of people needs to be working alone in their quietest space, heads down, doing the thing, right? Or maybe they do the thing while they're on the treadmill, or maybe their time, their focus time is, I like to have my hands doing something. So I do some really creative thinking, and it's stupid, but I do it while I'm folding laundry. It just works for me. Nobody should tell me when or how.
Exactly.
But we have to make space for all of those things, because I will promise you that sitting in an office 5 days a week, because I'm told that that's where I'm supposed to be, does not promote the best productivity for me. And I am, not unique in that setting.
Oh, no. I remember plenty of office meetings where I was falling asleep. And it was precisely because of that, because of appearances and how I focus and listen, which is the same thing. I have to be doing something with my hands to keep me occupied. And if I'm not doing some sort of crafts, weaving or folding or doing something like that, then I have to be on my laptop playing solitaire, like something that's kind of mindless, that doesn't really require much thought, but kind of keeps me here in this room in my body listening. Otherwise, I'm out, who knows where I am. I am certainly not present here. And I used to get called on that all the time because I look like I am zoning out, because every time I try to do something that keeps me present, it doesn't look right to other people. And that's not how they would focus. So it shouldn't be how I would focus. And that didn't work for me. I actually got in trouble in grad school for that, because I was playing another such, I think it was like a shooter game while I was taking notes during class. And the wall behind me was glass. And the program director had brought somebody in for a tour, and they saw me playing games. And so I got called into the program director's office, like, you just made the school look bad. We can't have this. And I told him, I hear you and I understand, and maybe I should move to where my back is not against the glass. But did you ask the class whose notes they're using to study for the final exam? That would be mine. Mine are the notes that people are sharing around to use for this class. So it works for me. And why can't that work for me? Why do I have to do it a different way if that works for me and all the other people around me?
You shouldn't, right? Nobody. We need to know how we show up and how we perform at our best. And that's a heartbreaking story that you just shared about grad school, right? That you were challenged on and told that you made the program look bad. Who cares how you get through the process of learning? We all know, right, that at different ages, we learn more visually. At different ages, we learn more orally. How do we synthesize, right, to hear it, see it, and write notes? There are all of these different connections. And for somebody to tell you that your way reflects poorly on the program, reflects really poorly on the individual whose mouth was moving when they said that.
Yeah. And I think it was just, I think I can see looking back that it was kind of the in-between era, right? Where we're moving into more of this technology stuff. When I started grad school, I had a freaking Palm Pilot. That's how how quickly all of this stuff has developed. When I started grad school, the first generation iPhones were coming out. And then this world has just exploded in the last 10, 15 years. And so I can understand, we're the first generation of kids that are bringing laptops to class regularly and asking to connect to the Wi-Fi. And this is a paradigm shift versus people bringing their notebooks. And also, if I'm bringing the laptop because I can type so much faster than I can write, there's a very real possibility I will just hop on the internet and check right on out of here mentally. And I don't want to do that. So I play a little game that keeps me present, right? And I'm not saying that the way forward is everybody play games on your computer or anything. I think
but it's what works for you. Prior to that, a generation ahead of that, you might have been doodling a comic, right? You might have been drawing, animation. You might have been doing all sorts of things if you have the skill to do things like that. But right, doodling would have been the low tech way of something like that.
Oh, I totally did that in elementary school and got in trouble for it back then.
Right. And that's also wrong, right? Because that's just right. You're processing. The hand is going so that the mind is processing the information. And we know these things. Educators have known these things, but that desire to discipline, conform behavior somehow has always sort of superseded what we know in terms of learning styles. And that's unfortunate.
This is all fascinating to me because exactly like you mentioned, there is kind of this pressure to conform. And it almost seems like that makes it easier for a manager to manage, right? If everybody's behaving the same way, then, well, cool, my job's pretty easy. But it's almost more of a challenge, and to me at least, having run teams, it's more of a worthwhile challenge to find the things that make my people excel and stand in their genius, and perhaps even elevate this beyond what I thought the vision could be for this project or this initiative that we're launching, and just giving them those tools and allowing them to operate the way they operate, even if it makes zero sense to me, just unlocks something that's really nifty.
Well, and I'm going to play with the words that you used in that, right? Managers manage tasks, manage things that are repeatable, that fit in the box.
Yes.
And really, I think what you've described just briefly in how you present it, right? You weren't a manager, you were a leader. And a leader is somebody who gives, their staff the freedom and the flexibility to drive results and outcomes. And it's not about metrics that don't matter, right? Were you at your desk from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
I hate it.
Right. But it's a key difference. And, we use the language and we use the word sometimes even interchangeably, but I think that there's a difference. And I think that it's important to remember that as we're building teams, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I never want to be the definitive answer that says my way is the right way, because I'll tell you for free, it's not always going to be the case. Every now and then I might have a brilliant freaking idea, but I am equally capable of having a really stinky, awful one.
Yes.
And you have to have a team around you that has the safety, the sense of, of rapport and relationship and trust to say, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I do love that. And I've loved being that person that exactly like you said, being a leader versus managing tasks, looking for outcomes and encouraging them to find their own process to get there, right? I worked with a writer on my team where I was helping him to develop a welcome sequence. And let's say, I'm trying to figure out how to anonymize this. It was an adult humor brand for a product that's related to natural functions we have as humans, right? And so there was an opportunity to literally go with toilet humor on this, and it would be on brand and everybody would laugh. And I told him, you've got a background as a comic. Poop jokes are funny. Let's just go to town and see what you come up with. We've got this outline with the themes for each email. Let me see what you got. And when he came back, I was laughing my tail off. It was so funny. And there was no way in hell I was going to present that to the client because he had gone straight past the line all the way into like NC-17. They're like,
but
X-rated.
Did it provide the point of departure to get what you needed?
Yes, because what I told him was, this was so funny. I'm so glad that you did this. And honestly, I would rather you push it way too far than to come at me from a bland, vanilla, blend-in perspective. It's much harder to add something special to the bland version than it is to go way too far and then rein it back in. So I told him, okay, cool. We found the NC-17 version of this. Could we bring it back to PG? Like, let's make it a little bit less disgusting, a little bit more family friendly. Then we can find a way to present this to the client, and I'll be on your side for that. And if they push back, they push back, right? But that was how we got to a version of this that was family friendly, that was on brand. And the client just went, oh my God, this is so fantastic. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't just taken the reins off and told him go. Be free.
And those are the kinds of exercises and opportunities that I love to facilitate with my clients, right? In the spirit of ideation and innovation, right? And coming up with the craziest ideas that they can possibly think of, right? And it's like, let's start with, Star Trek level crazy, right? We're beaming to the moon, where whatever it is that we think that this business could be doing, should be doing, would benefit our clients, the world, our community, whatever it is. Think as big and outrageously as we possibly can.
Yes.
And let's get as much of that idea out there, because in those big, obnoxious, crazy things that are never going to become reality are themes of things that can.
Yes.
And for my clients, getting into the habit and the ritual of ideating and thinking crazy allows them to innovate and come up with the new things, the new products, the new services, the new ways of doing work internally, how we shift from a traditional 5-day week to a 4-day week. How do we make these things reality? But we have to start really big and really crazy, and then pull back in the ideas that we can actually then work with. And over time, maybe these things can get bigger and a little bit more crazy. And that's kind of the fun of that process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, none of the things that we enjoy now would exist if it weren't for somebody having a crazy idea that somebody else was like, there's no way that will ever work. I imagine the first person to pitch the idea for the iPhone, right, that we could have it all in our pocket, was probably, people were going, wait, what? I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. I already have a flip phone. Like, why do I need it to have a camera? It just doesn't make sense. Why would I invest in that? And somebody took a chance on it, Steve Jobs, and made it awesome. And now it's kind of the new standard, right? And I don't know if I'm totally making up facts on that one. I very well could be. But it's just interesting to me that like the big vision has to exist first, and you have to believe it's possible for things to change. Otherwise, you're just going to be playing small. I guess for some people is fine, but for the rest of us, I'd rather play big.
Rather always play big, right? You can always rein something in, and I guess you were talking about it with the comedian and the content. It's easier to have something that's too much and scale back than to have the blank page and go, what do I do with this? So yeah, I'm a big proponent of dreaming big, swinging big, and going with gusto, and then finding the point of appropriate from that.
Yeah. Oh, gusto is such a good word. I love that. All right. So I'm going to do an abrupt segue, and I'm going to say, take us back. Like, what got you into this line of work? How did you get to this point with building this particular business?
Absolutely. So the year is 2009. I'm in my mid 30s, and I'm on my way to the roller coaster. I've got my ticket, and I swipe my ticket. I take the seat. The bar comes down. I'm holding on as we start to ascend, and I realize that my knuckles are white and my stomach is in my throat, and we haven't even moved yet.
Oh, goodness.
And I hear ding. The elevator doors open. I shake off my little daydream, and I realize that it's 8 a.m. The CEO has called me into his office, and I don't know why. And nothing good comes from this.
Yes.
So I take a deep breath and I walk into his office. You have to understand that he is a gregarious person. He is a Southern charmer, Texas drawl, big smile and big blue eyes. And I'm not buying the charm this morning. I'm just not sure what's about to happen. And he greets me and he gives me a big hug, and he starts talking as he offers me a seat in his office. I'm sitting down, and he starts. And all I hear is wah, 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 wah. The teacher from the Peanuts is in my head. Wah, 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 wah. We make things too hard. Wah, 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 wah. I want to try something different. Wah, 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 wah. We're a startup after all. I'm sitting there and I'm smiling and I'm nodding, and I don't understand a word that the man is saying, but I'm focused wholly on getting out of this conversation as fast as humanly possible. I have my break, I have the opportunity, and I went outside to catch my breath, and I took a look around. I'm in Tempe, Arizona. It's spring, the sun is shining, it's gorgeous, and the building is glass and it's glistening. And I look at it and I see the roller coaster from hell. And I know with every fiber of my being, I cannot get back on that ride.
Oh.
And I'm standing there and I'm staring and I'm focusing on my breathing because I'm still kind of out of breath and my heart is racing. And this little voice inside my head says, I don't want to go back in there. And I was thinking, really, I totally kind of agree. And then this other little voice says, oh, but Lisa, you have to. Your job is inside of there. Well, the voice says, so do something different.
Yeah.
But it's a paycheck. It's my paid time off. It's my 401k. It's my future. It's everything I ever wanted in my career. I am building a team of project managers who are there to make this business more effective, more efficient. It's everything I've ever wanted. And I take another deep breath and go, I can't do this. And in that moment, I decided to take a risk. I decided that I was in my mid-30s. I am single at that moment. I have no children. If there's ever a point in my life when I'm in a position to do something radically different, now is the time. In that moment, I decided to become an entrepreneur. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what it was going to take to do it. But in that moment, in this little temper tantrum inside of my head, I made the choice that I was going to build a consulting practice that would make businesses better tomorrow than they are today. And in doing that, I decided that I was going to build my own roller coaster. If there were twists and there were turns and there were unexpected loop-to-loops, they were going to be there because they were fun for me and they were not something that somebody else was putting on me.
Yes.
And in this journey for 14 years, I first and foremost took control of my life and of my career. And I do work and I can align with the values and the people that I want to work with. And I can align and choose not to work with people. And I get to enjoy the ride, even though it's not always easy. And it is not always easy. I have those opportunities to make it what I want it to be and throttle the speed and the pace and the type of work. And what I do today with the business, while it may resemble what we were doing 14 years ago, I never would have envisioned where I'm at today.
Ooh, oh, that's fantastic. Can we dig a little bit deeper into that? Like what you started with, knowing, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this, and how you got to today and where you're at.
So in that experience, I was a startup and there was a senior executive team. All the C-level executives had teams of consultants who were working for them. And they were little fiefdoms and they were little military units running around the building, running amok, never talking with one another, and certainly not ever working together. And I thought that was absolute insanity. I truly believed that the purpose of a consulting presence is to bring people together, to collaborate, to build the foundation, to grow and scale. What I was watching were silos being created and reinforced with attitude, with procedure, with just bad attitudes. I'm not even going to mince words. Some of those were just grumpy people. And I think that they were all worried about their company's bottom line.
Yeah.
I call it landing and expanding, and it is a consulting practice mainstay. I did not want to do that. I wanted to build teams that would break those silos, get teams working together and make an impact. But at that point in time, I knew how to do that through the discipline of project management. So that was the first thing we started doing, was going into environments to help people manage projects, because projects fail all the time. They fail for all sorts of different reasons, but we can make that better. That was phase one. Iteration one, experiment one, however you want to look at that. And then there are other things that I know that for projects to be successful, right, you have to have processes. We've already talked a lot about the people and the process and the kind of where I'm at today, the people, process, then technology. So I kind of had to scale it, right? We started with projects, which enforce process, and then we had to get the people. And so over time, the focus has changed, and I do very little project management. We do a lot of process management and refinement and efficiency, and a tremendous amount of work with people. So
Mm.
one of the disciplines that we use and rely heavily on is organizational change management.
Hmm.
And that is like the best practice of best practices because it's all about people. In
Yes.
business, we have to help take people on a journey. And as business grows and changes, right, change is inevitable. And we humans don't like to change. But if we can teach people how to embrace change, it becomes so much easier.
Hmm.
And if we get used to the idea of change is inevitable and we communicate the right way, here's what is going to happen. Here's
Hmm.
what it means to you as an employee. Here's what it means to our clients or our customers. Here's what it means to the business as a whole. It gives everybody a chance to go, I am aware of what's happening around me. And if it's interesting and presented in the right ways, I may even say, I have a desire to participate in this change. And
Hmm.
now we've got something because now we have
Yes.
people willing to move us forward in the experience. And then we go through the learning, right? What is it? How do we do it? What are the new skills? What's the new technology? And we learn all of those things. And then it's real, right? We have made change.
Hmm.
And then the real magic has to happen because we have to sustain that over time and not go back to the dreaded the way we've always done it.
Oh, yeah.
And so organizational change and taking people through, we've made the change and make that change stick into the future is the key to everything.
Hmm.
That is the ultimate underlying recipe for success. If we can make a change happen and sustain it over time, we can do anything.
I love that. This is just speculation from the outside in, but I know a friend who has an agency and he works with entrepreneurs. And this agency is staffed with writers who help these entrepreneurs write their launches and their sales pages and their emails, et cetera, right? A typical agency model. Then AI came on the scene at the end of last year and has really just accelerated that much more. And I know several agencies that went ahead and made the move to like cut writers, employ AI, but not this one. This one went, I'm betting that a lot of our entrepreneur clients are going to be curious about how they can use AI in our business. And so instead of replacing the writers, or like I go into my silo and dig deep on this and proclaim everything that I've learned, I'm going to mobilize my team of writers and say, hey, I've bought you all of this subscription access to ChatGPT and these other, and I want you to experiment with this. Feel free to use this to generate copy ideas, bullet ideas. Obviously don't turn in ChatGPT work as your own, but I want to learn and play and break things and figure out how we could teach our clients how to use this for themselves and use this as the tool that it is. And I just thought that that was really interesting, that that could have easily been a fearful thing for the writers on that team of like, crap, I don't know where I stand. I don't know how he thinks about AI. Am I going to be booted? This is a big change. Like you said, we're resistant to change. And it felt like he just very smoothly incorporated that massive technological shift into this is the way we do things. We are going to become the leaders that help our clients understand this technology. And to do that, we got to understand it. So like, let's go break some things. Let's go have fun with this.
Let's take apart some of the things that whether he was aware of it in the moment or not.
Mm-hmm.
He, by embracing the generative AI and helping their clients learn how to use it for very basic functionality, it is allowing him to elevate his writing staff to perform higher level projects that bill at a higher rate, that have a bigger sticking power. And he has elevated his entire team's capability and his entire profit model.
Mm-hmm.
By embracing the new, empowering the client, and letting his writers actually do things. Let's own it, right? Writing email is no fun for anybody,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Depends on whether you get to make poo jokes like my comedian friend or not.
Well, but even when you're writing the crude jokes, right, there are still higher level writing tasks, projects that a writer would rather do than write content really for emails. Let me just kind of put that in that bottom of the barrel type stuff. But empowering a client to use ChatGPT for that 80% of stuff, that's 20% that they're still going to continue to use their human talent on, is more engaging for the writer. And again, it'll be more profitable for the business. So I love that story. It's fabulous.
I thought it was so, so smart. And I mean, I found out about it from one of the writers on staff who told me how this was going. And I encountered it when I was facing my own resistance with AI. And it was that change resistance, exactly like you said, where I was like, I don't know how that works. I don't know how good that can be. I'm just not going to bother. And so one day I found myself in a situation where I was like, I want to write this like mini book about different client challenges that we face as human beings, right? And the miscommunications that can happen therein that cause a whole bunch of tension and angst. And I wanted to give examples of how I would walk somebody through altering their thinking and altering their approach in this. And I know somewhere in here, I've got 100 different scenarios of the different ways clients and employees, clients and contractors, miscommunicate and butt heads. And sitting down and brain dumping all of that is just producing this big mental block. And then this friend of mine goes, you could use Chat GPT for that. And I was like, wait, what? Come again? And I was like, I mean, it's going to be, they said, use your copy chief hat here. You're going to be instructing a junior writer on how to come up with the list, which may mean you need to try a couple of times, but tell them who you are, who you're speaking to, what problem you're trying to solve, what your voice sounds like, and the kinds of ideas, like give some examples of what you're trying to generate, and then say, cool, give me 100 ideas, because then you get to cherry pick the best ones that it comes up with. And it's going to do that in like 2 minutes, what would have taken you 2 hours. And I went, okay, 2 minutes versus 2 hours. I like this. Let's go. And I plugged it in, and I would say, yeah, out of the 100 or so that it came up with, probably 30 of them were decent enough to work on. But how long would it have taken me to work up those 30 ideas, especially facing the resistance that I was, versus just embracing this and trying it for the experiments as it was? And you used experiment earlier as the first iteration of your business. And I thought that was genius. Like, yes, experiments.
Well, my new best friend, Chat GPT, and we do all sorts of things together.
Did you give it a name?
I know I call it Chat GPT. I won't even lie. But let's see. Prospecting. We talked about how painful and awful that is. So there's different types of prospecting. The colder it is, the harder it is for me to do it, right? Stranger danger. I am a Gen X kid, right? Stranger danger just freaks me right out. Cold calls are like the worst. But right, we don't cold call anymore, right? I use LinkedIn and I make a connection request to somebody that I think looks interesting. And then there's these little conversations that we start to make happen in LinkedIn land. Well, Chat GPT and I created, what does contact one look like? Okay, we've had this piece of information. I want to mature the conversation. What does contact two look like? And I have like 4 levels of interaction. I also host a podcast. And so I'm prospecting for guests. And so I have a series of connection requests and conversation starters that are around the podcast side of it. So that's 2 different types of prospecting that I hate doing, that my new best friend and I have really refined out. When I started my podcast, Disrupt and Innovate, I started it with me monologuing on different topics, trying to set a tone and set a pace before I started the interview kind of phase of this. And Chat GPT and I gave him a list of disruptive topics and things that are happening in the business world. And I wanted to talk about, what they are, what it means, how disruption plays a part in that area, what innovations are coming from it. And it created the script and the show flow for what my content would look like for my initial episodes of the podcast.
Nice.
Obviously, a couple of iterations and a lot of tweaking on my part to get it right. But that first set of things that it did in moments would have taken me some weeks of some research.
Oh, yeah.
And it condensed it down like the blink of an eye, the snap of a fingers, gave me something that was an outline that was 80% baked. And then I didn't have the blank page to stare at. And I was able to start taking action. And so I love, right? I that is totally my new BFF.
I say the same thing too. I totally didn't expect to get on an AI rant today, but for everybody that is afraid that it's going to take jobs, I mean, to a certain extent, if you don't differentiate, there are certain tasks that it can do better than a human. And that's okay, because that means, just like when we had automobiles invented that, took away from that made the ranches less prevalent with the horses and the buggies and whatnot. Everything evolves and changes, and new industries pop up that we can't predict as a result of these old industries shifting out into different things. So I'm not as afraid of it as I think a lot of folks are. That's not to say it won't have real impact, but I do like the fact that I can use it as that tool as leverage, right? I'm not outsourcing my thinking to it, which I think is the mistake that most people make. I'm not asking it to write a book for me. I'm not asking it to write my articles for me. I'm asking it to give me an outline. I'm asking it to give me a format, some ideas for a title that I can riff on. Like, I'm using that tool exactly like you said, to beat the blank page and to give myself a jump start that I can react from. Genius.
Yeah. But let's also not downplay the things that it will be able to take over. And that's not a bad thing in our healthcare industry. And this is where we're going to go down a spiral, and you can ask me to shut up at any point. But in our healthcare space today, we are lacking skilled labor. We do not have enough nurses. We do not have enough doctors. We do not have enough medical technicians. And there are things in a triage scenario, in a telehealth environment, that an AI running the process can expedite through so that it can route and prioritize who needs to be treated, how they need to be treated, and get them into the right hands of the right clinician who may or may not be physically in the same space with the patient, right? The AIs can do a lot for us, and that starts to help populations that are not getting the healthcare that they need. Rural populations where you have a hard time, where you physically have to drive potentially hundreds of miles to get to an ER. It's really scary to stop and think that that is a very real thing in our country today. If you live in a metropolitan area, you don't think about it, but remote and rural lifestyle is still a little harsh sometimes. And there are things that AI can do for us that take people out of the mix and make the quality of the experience, and in the scenario with patients, can make the outcomes, which sometimes we be talking life or death here, better. Because they can route you the right way faster, so that you don't have to repeat steps through the start and stop of different interactions, that the AI can streamline that process and walk with the patient all the way through to actual treatment. I can't wait to see some of those things happen for us.
Oh, I love that. And I made that funny noise just because I thought that was, so I hadn't even concepted that could be a thing, but I think you nailed it. And it ties back so perfectly to everything you were saying at the beginning about a process. That process is broken because literally every time I get transferred, I have to repeat the same story that I have told 4 or 5 times. And now my blood pressure is higher and I am frustrated. And it's not your fault I'm frustrated. The process has failed us both. And yet you are the person that I get to take my rage out on because I'm not getting the care I need. Whereas something like this could be seamless from start to finish and give us better outcomes, better experiences with less frustration all around. I like that.
Well, and that's not even taking into it actually starting to be able to do triage, right? Asking questions about symptoms, mapping that up against the databases of medical history and knowledge, knowing everything about your medical history and things that you've tried, what medications you're on, right? Things that can get missed if you were in a scenario, you were in a car accident and you were unconscious and unable to speak, right? If the AI was able to come in and aggregate data from multiple sources and say, okay, we've got Angie and she has this medical condition and she's on this medication and has a reaction to this, and her primary care physician is, right? And collecting all of this information, and you are unconscious, but you are getting treated properly because we have these really cool tools at our disposal that are taking care and protecting your health and well-being.
Oh, yes. I love that. Oh, we're going to keep going down the rabbit hole because I love to, and we still got a couple of extra minutes. I imagine, especially as a woman in the healthcare system, and I'm going to go there. I've had so many sucky experiences in the medical industry where I was not listened to, or I was told I was being a baby. That actually happened in the ER. And like, I'm from the country, y'all. You don't know what it takes to get me to hoof myself to the ER to deal with people in that stressful situation, to be told by a doctor that I'm a baby for something that I think is threatening my life. Like, ooh, I wanted to set things on fire that day. I wanted to break all of the medical equipment, but I was too sick to do it. And then it turns out I had to have a tonsillectomy at 23. which is a fair rarity, like to have your tonsils so bad that they're taken out as an adult, because that's a hard surgery to recover from when you're an adult. But I digress. Anyway, like the point of this being that, that's an instance where I think the AI can be super handy because human bias doesn't come in, where somebody can look at me and see me struggling to breathe and somehow decide for themselves that I am not seriously ill, that I'm just a big baby and not deserving of the same medical care as someone else because they don't think I'm serious enough, where I'm sitting here going, why do you think I'm here, bro? I think it's serious. I'm in pain. I'm hurting. I'm struggling to breathe. Yeah, that makes me mad. I didn't expect that rant today.
Oh, there's so many of them. So can put yourself in the shoes of you're not only a female, you are now an elderly woman, and you are in your 80s or your 90s, and you are sick and you are in the ER, and they're talking in jargon and language that you don't understand, and you're scared and you're alone. And I had the experience with my grandmother a number of years ago where we were trying to get her treated, and they talk at her, around her. And if I hadn't been in the room to facilitate, right, actually slow it down, pay attention, speak in plain English, right, things that if this whole process at this stage would have been managed by the AI, right, we would have already been through a whole lot of this stuff. And the AI can communicate in language, right, in ways that you understand. And if you say, I don't understand that, right, it's going to rephrase, reposition, and try again. Whereas human beings are very bad at that.
Yes.
And so, there are all sorts of options and opportunities for that technology to grow and evolve. And it's weird saying the word technology and then using language, grow and evolve, but really that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It is a learning platform, and it isn't about what was coded. It's about what it learns, how it applies it, and what the next piece of information it intakes into, and how it processes and synthesizes that. So I personally am really excited, and I didn't expect that we'd go on the AI path today, but it's always a fun one. It's always a fun one because I think, right, we have in our minds, the entertainment industry has funneled and fueled this for us. We go back to the Star Trek, the computer on the ship and the dialogues that it had with the crew. Iron Man and Jarvis, right, I think is the winner chicken dinner right now. I want that interaction. I want Jarvis in my life, and I surrender all like decision making in household operations.
Yes.
Those are, I'm ready.
Yes, same here. Like, Jarvis, I'm a little bit sleepy, but I need to get to San Antonio. Could you please drive me 3 hours? Yes, thank you. I can't wait for that. Like, getting some of the tasks off my plate. All right. That was a lot of great rambling. This is what I love about having these conversations. I never know where they're going to lead, but they always wind up so fascinating. I see perspectives that I never could have seen if I hadn't had such wonderful guests like you. So thank you so much for being on the show, for taking us down the rabbit hole. Tell us a little bit more about your business and where we can find you.
Absolutely. So predominantly, right, I am a coaching and consulting business advisory services. You can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa L. Levy, and the business website is lcubedconsulting.com. Or for founders and entrepreneurs, you might find it a little bit more interesting at lisallevy.com. It talks a little bit more about those specific programs. And you can find us on YouTube. It is the @lcubed Consulting channel.
Fantastic. I'm going to make sure that they've got clickable links in the show notes so that they can check it out. And thank you again for being a guest. This was such a great episode.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.